whole sermon series a little bit on 1 Samuel 14, and now we're going to do a little bit further. We're going to recap the first 6 verses and go into the next 6, and next week we're going to actually encapsulate the entire story because there's so much going on here. In 1 Samuel 14, verse 1, it says, "One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor-bearer, 'Come, let's go to the Philistine outpost on the other side,' but he did not tell his father." We talked about this last week. Jonathan is doing something here that his dad tried to do, but have you ever had a situation where you've seen two people have the same call or the same opportunity, but in very different circumstances with absolutely tremendously different outcomes? See, Saul had everything. Saul is the first elected king of Israel. God took a bunch of slaves and freed them, walked them across an impossible part of the sea that was huge. He fed them and gave them water in the desert as they walked around. Now they're in the promised land. He tore down the walls of Jericho and he established the reign. And here they are, these people, with a cloud, the God cloud, hanging out. Not the cloud where we put our storage for all our photos and videos, but actually like God cloud, okay? He's there. And they say, you know what, this is nice, but the Philistines have a king, the Egyptians had a king, I think we need a king. And God says, you're right, I'm your king. No, not you. Zzz. That guy, the tall, good-looking one, we want him. And God's like, are you serious? You want the pretty tall guy over me? Yeah, we do. And this is how good God is. I would have just smited everyone, hit the reset button, said, screw this, people suck. And sometimes I think that anyway. Thankfully, I'm not God. And here's the thing. There's God who says, okay, I love you enough to follow through with this, but I'm going to do something more. You want this guy, I'm going to give you what you need. He's going to have a sidekick. Except Saul's actually going to be Robin to his Batman. His name is Samuel. He's going to be my prophet. What's a prophet, God? Well, I'll tell you. It's someone who speaks on my behalf to give inspiration and influence to the one who's reigning over the nation, because the one who reigns over the nation is responsible for the nation, and every decision he makes doesn't just impact himself, it's the entire nation. And I love you too much to leave you to your own devices, so here is my support. You're rejecting me. Maybe you won't reject the one I'm sending. I'm still here. I'm just hurt. Not a really good start. Saul's 30 years old, and since he has this confidence, I've been chosen, he has almost this arrogance about his leadership and his kingship. And he sees the Philistine army, which is the greatest army right now in their opposition. So they had 10,000 chariots and 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand of the sea, which tells you a lot about the army that they're facing. And he says, you know what? God wills it. God's on my side. I'm going to go do this and I'm going to take them out. What he doesn't do is wait for Samuel to come and give the inspiration to give the offerings and connect the people and himself into the presence of God. He says, well, no, God is with me, so he has to follow my lead. Have you ever done that? You ever done something like that? Where you make a decision with the best intention. Saul's not trying to destroy a nation, which he ends up doing. He's trying to do what God has established him to do, but he doesn't wait for God to be with him. See, sometimes we do have to wait for God. See, Jonathan doesn't, but it's already because the desperate moment has come and he has to do something with God. But sometimes we have to wait for God. We think we have a good idea and we just sit there and we say, okay, Lord, I'm going to do this, but I want this to be in line with you. Saul didn't do that. Samuel said he was coming. Saul didn't wait. So Saul takes out his army and they see the Philistines. And right then and there, the nation becomes divided. Some of them flee and hide in the caves, disassociating themselves from the identity of God's people. Some of them actually throw themselves at the feet of the mercy of the Philistines because it's better to live as a slave than to die as a free man. And some of them retreat back out of the promised land and disassociate themselves again from the identity of being God's people because it comes at too high a cost, because the one making the decisions has impacted us in a negative way, and the entire nation that God has just liberated and set up is divided and already conquered mentally. And the remaining soldiers lived in terror, it says in Scripture. Not a good start. So Saul does what any normal religious human being does. I need to appease God and get him back on my side. I'm going to do all these religious things. So he starts setting up the sacrifices, which wasn't his job. It was the job of the priest. But since he's in a pickle, he's not thinking clearly. And I got to get God on my side, because if God's on my side, he has to bend his will to mine, and then I can have my victory. And he starts doing these things, and Samuel's like, what are you doing? One job, wait for God. If you trusted me, like you said you did, you would have waited so I could be the voice of influence in your life. Look at what you've done. The nation is already divided and conquered. You were set up to reign in your lineage forever. It's gone. As if he wasn't having a bad day already. And then the Philistines, being as clever as they are, they could have just completely eliminated their enemy at that point, who's already divided and conquered, if we're honest. They send out different parties. They say, you know what? We're going to do warfare right. And these secret groups in the night go and they kill all the blacksmiths who are in charge of keeping the weapons sharp and battle ready. And they just wait them out, because eventually swords break down. Weapons break down. And now it's to the point where there's only 2 swords left in the entire nation. I like physical illustrations. This is not a sword. This is a Bowie knife. And I'm a big fan of different blades. Now, this is just shy of being the actual lineage of a Roman short sword. But Bowie, in history, and I love history, let's be honest. Isn't it funny in Sunday school, we teach the Bible history, but whenever, I remember for me in Sunday school, I was shocked and appalled as I grew up that I realized that David actually cut Goliath's head off. Because, that's not PG enough. We don't want to tell the kids that. We'll tell him that he buried a rock into his forehead. We won't tell him he lopped off his head with his own sword and then hunted down his brothers, but that's okay. Bowie made his own knife as a means of actually intimidating his opponents. And one of the things he used this for was when he was playing cards, he'd stick it into the table, and if anyone called him a cheat, it was common practice back in the day to go outside and shoot each other. And whoever was living was right. This is the way they settled arguments. I think we'd have a lot less arguments in the church if we did it this way. Although I'd be dead, but either way. So he sticks the knife in the table. This guy calls him a cheat. He goes outside, and the guy actually thinks, oh, you're the guy. You're Bowie. Yeah, I am. I'm sorry, I was wrong. And he actually extends him grace, turns his back, and the guy shoots Bowie in the back and goes over and rolls him over to finish him off, and Bowie buries the knife up to the hilt and then opens him up, and that's the rest of the story. I love history. But if you don't have a weapon, or a weapon that works, what good is it? There's 600 men surrounding Saul as he's retreated away from the battlefront. There's 2 swords left in the entire nation of Israel. One belongs to Saul the king, and since they want to keep the lineage going, the other one belongs to Jonathan. 2 swords in the entire nation that's defeated and conquered. And Saul's confidence was surrounded in the people he kept company with. So he's there, and he's got all these different prophets and all these people of the higher economy of Israel. And he's surrounding himself with his closest friends, with 600 armed guards as a personal entourage of protectors, just in case somebody came for him in the middle of the night. He felt safe in that. The only person he didn't keep company with was Samuel. The one person he should have been cleaving to, who represented God's voice in his life, he disassociated from completely. And here's his son saying to his armor bearer, whose job is it to carry his stuff, you want to come with me and pick a fight? 10,001 odds against. 10,001. This is wrong. I got to do something. There may be a mountain in front of me, and I may feel like there is no absolute way that God can do anything. There can be any victory in my life and the life of the people, but my dad, the leader of this nation, has done something so wrong and it's left us so divided. We have no choice but to throw ourselves at the feet of God to do something else. And this is not the will of the Lord. I know it in my bones, and something is prompting me from within to do something about this injustice. So he decides to do that. But before he even gets to his destination, he sees these two cliffs on this path that he has to walk down, and the names of them are thorns and mud bogs. So the path he has to walk down is going to be exhausting, and every step he's got to pull his legs out, and it's exhausting. And if you lean on the walls, you're going to be torn apart by these thorns that are growing, and you have to climb this stupid cliff to get to the people to fight the impossible battle. And it's like, I need a break. But he says, no, if God wills it, let's go. I love this speech. He's talking to his armor bearer, giving him the opportunity to join him. He says, perhaps the Lord will do something, for he can save by many or by few. Basically what he's saying is, maybe we won't die. Maybe God will do something. Because right now there's two choices. We're going to have victory or we're going to be slaughtered. But I know that God is capable of destroying this enemy, tearing down this mountain that stands before me and the nation that I am supposed to represent and be a part of, whether it's us, me alone, or by himself. Maybe he's going to do it today. But the thing is, far too often we just get so caught up with, well, I don't know. I want to know. I want to have assurance before I step out in faith. That's not how it works. And I hate that. Our human nature says, I want a little bit of understanding of the footing before I put my foot out, put my weight on it. God says, I'm your footing. Are you going to do something? And sometimes, and this is the hard thing because no one else can tell you, God's going to reveal something in your life, in your heart that says, it's time to go and do. You have to do something. Something needs to be done. You're not going to have the plans. He's not going to sit there and architect out every step of the way. Because sometimes I like to do that. I like to measure out, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. This looks good. This is simple, baby steps. It slowly builds. It's measurable. And God's like, etch a sketch away. And I'm like, what are you doing? I got one sword. I got one guy. And it's 10,000 to 1. There's 2 of us. And he says, ain't it great? No! Maybe God will do something because he can. I think that's the thing we need to take out of this whole background of last week and stepping into the story this week. God can do anything. But sometimes there's no assurance if he will when we want him to. It is absolutely okay to not know the answers to everything. Far too often people come to you, and more often than not, which is funny, outside of the church, people come to me as a pastor, and they ask me things, and I say, you know what? And they come in closer and say, I don't know. And it's the most dissatisfying answer you can give to somebody. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know. But it's the truth. Just because we have faith doesn't mean we're always going to have the right answers. Sometimes we won't know. Because more often than not, it's easy to inspire an entire nation to come back if you just tell them a white lie. God is with us. He told me to say this. And far too often in the history of the church, people have been looking for that. Well, if you just tell me this, it's good. He didn't tell me. I'm just prompted to do something because I have to do it. Maybe he will come through. I don't know. That does not inspire a lot of people. That is not one of these motivational speeches. Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. Maybe we're going to die today. Come on, church. Follow your pastor into absolute uncertainty because God can, but I'm not sure if he will. And we could completely get obliterated and bleed to death on the streets through our ministry as we get torn to shreds by making ourselves vulnerable to the people who need to experience the love of Jesus Christ. But I'm not going to guarantee anyone's safety here because I can't do that because life is hard. But we want that because there's been bad theology that teaches that. It's okay to not have the answers, but here's the thing. We know the one who is the answer. When Jesus is called the way, the truth, and the life, we have to believe that. He is the path that we can always follow. He is the way to God. He is the truth of God incarnate. And He is the light that will illuminate the darkness in our light when it is so black you can't see your hand in front of your face. And we don't know when He's going to turn that light on, give us the path, and lead us down a road. We just have to be willing to go when He prompts us to go without any explanation. See, the word faith far too often has been associated with the word belief. And that's not fully right because when you look at the Greek and Hebrew words, they've got all these sub-meanings. that define the actual word. The strongest word association with faith is trust, not belief. Belief is the start of it. I had a nephew who believed in Santa for years. It doesn't make him real. Coming, some fat white guy breaking in your house every year and leaving you presents. That's creepy. As if we don't have enough problems in North America right now. If you trust someone, though, it implies absolute relationship. It's not just believing that he's out there. It's engaging that he's with you now. And if your trust and faith in God isn't greater than your fears, we will never step into danger and face impossibility with victory. Amen. Someone. So after all that, this is the response of the armor bearer. Do all that you have in mind. Anything you want to do it. Go ahead. Lead on. I am with you, heart and soul. All that I am is invested. You have my total investment. See, a movement of God starts with one person. And then it quickly becomes two, and that is doubled 200%. Jesus Christ chose 12 people to change the world. Don't tell me that small numbers can't have impact. I'm so sick of people cramming down your throats. Well, your church needs to get bigger. It needs to get bigger. It needs to get bigger. I don't care. God will bring in who he brings in when he wants to bring in. As long as he's doing life-changing work and we're open to that, that's all that I care about and all we should be responsible for. Numbers will come, numbers will go. Whatever God wants. He wants to turn us into some sort of like larger church. Oh, Lord. It's got to be done his way. But when we just look at numbers as the ultimate measuring stick, it didn't work out so well for Saul. He had an entire nation. They got divided and conquered. Jonathan has total influence over one person. Saul had influence over an entire nation, and it fell to pieces. But Jonathan has absolute investment over one person. One person, but absolute buy-in, heart and soul. I think my mission and my purpose is if we can get on board together, which I believe we're doing and already there to a degree, is everyone here not buying into me, but buying into we are a movement of Jesus Christ. That God is capable of doing anything and everything. He won't tell us when or how. And sometimes we have to take steps of faith, knowing that he can, but not knowing that he will. And that we will be so courageous and bold in our lives that when he brings us opportunities, we'll be so changed in our character that our actions that come of that will say, I need to do something about this. And we won't think twice about it. We'll just say, okay, Lord, I throw myself at the feet of mercy. Help me to represent you fully. Do your will. God can save. By many or by few, but he wants our all, your heart, your soul, your mind. And then Jonathan says this, well, come. We will cross towards them and we will let them see us. Not good tactics. It's interesting that Jonathan doesn't repeat the tactics that were given to them when they snuck in at dark and they killed all the blacksmiths. Jonathan doesn't say, let's sneak around behind him and start killing one or two a night, and then eventually after about 10 years, they'll be defeated. He doesn't say that. He says, well, let's go towards them and show them that we are here. The armor bearer's probably like, oh, I've made a decision. I want to retract my previous statement. Because remember, they have to walk down a path, climb up a cliff, and stand there and say, ta-da! With one sword. See, I'm good. One sword between them. Ta-da! Thank you, Bex. My armor bearer. I'm not giving her the knife. It's sometimes, though, which is so hard to do, and I want you to hear me, if you're in a situation where, just like the Elvis song, you're standing there and Lord, it feels like you give me a mountain. Just like Jonathan must have felt like, just like the entire nation felt like of Israel. If we just stand there and say, here I am, to make yourself known to the enemy. To make yourself known and say, it's not about my strength, there's just two of us, you could kill us in an instant. But it's not about me, it's about who I stand for. It's about who's in me. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. If we actually believe that, we believe that the victory is absolutely completed, that's Jesus Christ, and he shares it with us, and he's able to actually do the impossible, like destroy an entire army with 2 people. Then we have no other choice but to stand up and say, here I am. Bring it. Because it's not about me, it's about the God that's in me. We have to reveal ourselves and say, here I am, here I come. Do your worst, because God's got me. But that is, again, against our instinctive nature. That's a choice. That is not easy or a natural rhythm. And then he continues on, and I love this. And he says, if they say to us after we've shown ourselves and have absolutely no tactical advantages, we're at the base of this cliff and say, hey, look, want to fight? If they say, wait there until we come down to you, we will stay there and not go up to them. What he's saying is, if they say, wait where you're at, we're going to come where you're to, little Nova Scotian there for you, we're going to die. We're going to die. That's going to be our sign from the Lord. If they come down to us, we're dead. But if they say, come up to us, we will climb up because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. If we have to climb up, vulnerable to our enemy, because how do you climb up? With your hands and your feet. Who's carrying Jonathan's sword? The armor bearer who's behind him, because he's leading by example, completely unarmed towards an enemy that could kill him at any second. After he's revealed himself to them, and he says, I'll tell you what, armor bearer, if they say, come up, we're going to kill them all because God has delivered them into our hands. Victory is here. Yay. You first. But to have that kind of confidence. And what we don't read is the armor bearer never second guesses him because he's already said, I am with you, heart and soul. I want to be the type of person that has that complete character influence of God so I can influence others that they will follow me into absolute uncertainty regardless of not having any explanation. This is certain death. This doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. And there's a reason why he didn't tell his dad, because if he told his dad this point, his dad would have talked him out of the will of God working in his life. Because even if people mean well in your life, if you give them the ultimate influence and the voice over your decisions, they won't always speak the right things about who you are and what you're doing for the Lord. Melanie and I, when we got married, unusual time in our lives, but we had this moment, both of us, independent from each other. We said, okay, now it's time to get married. The thing is, I had a part-time job, living at home with my dad, and not a lot of money coming in. And Melody was still in school for another year. And we're like, well, but there was something in us saying, you got to do this now, and I don't know why, but we did. So I proposed. I borrowed money off my dad to buy a ring, and we had so much opposition to that, and we had so many people try and talk us out of it and say, this is stupid. We had people write Melody letters saying, oh, leave him, he's not this and that, blah, 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 he's no good. And it was people that we cared about and had influence in our lives, and it was difficult. Because I read these letters, I'm like, you suck? You know, that's... But some of the points I couldn't argue. He's not financially well off. No. A month before we actually were due to get married, and Melody had put down the deposit on her venue. She paid for it. I didn't have the money. I had to borrow money for a ring. A month before we get married, I get my first pastoral job, which paid really good money. And I made just enough to cover everything in that first month. And then we had enough money, so I was still living at home, but I was able to support and pay for Melody's last year of school and her housing on campus. And it wasn't this great revelation where God saved somebody's life because we lived the first year of our marriage in obedience to what prompted us, but we just knew. I don't know how else to explain it. When you know, you know. I said no pole dancing. But sometimes in our life, we have to be obedient. Well, you can choose to be obedient, actually, is more the accurate description. There's nothing that guarantees success. But there's something so fulfilling in following through and seeing God provide in impossible ways that are so beyond you that you just, that's mine. Go my tail. For instance, Gideon in the Bible. He tested God in a very strange and really a stupid way. Well, I'll tell you what, Lord, if this really is what you want, keep the fleece dry and let the ground be wet. You tell me that's not a man's way of thinking. What woman in this room would say, what, the fleece? That's how we're going to tell it's God's will. That's totally a guy thing. Thomas Post-resurrection is the only one who hasn't seen Jesus Christ standing in front of him, doesn't believe the testimonies of his brothers and the people he's lived life with and committed himself to. He says, no, I'm not going to believe it unless Jesus presents himself to me. I stick my hand in his side with a spear pierced and my finger through his hand. It's gross. He's a gross guy. So what does Jesus do? Ta-da! Thomas. Touch. Feel. Experience. The thing about God is he is willing to play our stupid little games sometimes because it means so much to us. See, I know that so often we use the scripture, well, do not test the Lord your God. Yes, but sometimes if you're actually seeking the will of God and you've already taken a step of action that you're hoping he's going to provide in, sometimes you set these things up and say, okay, Lord, if this is you, follow through in this way and I'll know it's you. And he will provide. Here's two guys standing at the base of the cliff saying, okay, we're here for a fight. God's going to conquer or we're going to die. If they say, come up to us, that's our sign. That is absolutely our sign. But isn't it interesting that it involved movement on their behalf? See, a lot of times in life, spiritually, being passive means being spiritually dead or inactive. Being passive brought death to these people. But being active and approaching the enemy in absolute certainty of God's capability brought victory and life and restoration to a nation that was divided. It wasn't just about two people. It was about an entire people. It was about God's story. But far too often our fears are too great and we just give into that and say, okay, it's too much. I can't. God says, just move. Don't stop. Keep going. I'm with you. And you won't see it until you look back. But when that victory comes into completion, like we're going to talk about next week, even if you only have one sword, two people, and there's 10,000 others, you might be swinging all day long, but they're going to go down like timber. When I worked at Foothills Landscaping, and we were working on the tree farm, and I was working with my two cousins, Wes and Barb's kids, Anna and Matthew, two of my closest companions. It was us and this one other guy named Ian. And what we were doing, don't touch that, what we were doing is chopping down dead trees and then putting them into the wood chipper and then going through all the rows of dead trees, and then someone would eventually come behind and scoop up the dead stuff and use it for fertilizer later on. Now, what was happening was these trees were still so green, it kept clogging up this machine. So when Matthew and I were working on this, it should have just taken about 40 minutes. We're into it 2 hours, and we're only down about 4 trees because we have to keep taking this stupid thing apart and cleaning it after every tree because it's getting so gummed up, it's not working properly. And so the guy gets mad, our foreman, and he sends 2 more people, Adam and this guy Ian. And we finally start to be able to have enough manpower to get this thing going so one person has a job and we're keeping this thing going with forward momentum. Matthew drives the tractor when we need to go to the next thing. Adam's ahead, organizing the branches so they go in nice and neat. Ian is pushing the things in and I'm doing some cleanup. And right now I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom. It is bathroom break time for Aaron. And there's been one time in my life when I've heard the voice of God audibly. And of course it comes to me when I have to evacuate my bowels and he chooses to yell at me and bring me to and I actually fell on my face. I'm at work, and I'm on my face because God says one word to me, stop. And I'm on my face in the middle of a field thinking, oh Jesus, please don't let anyone have seen that. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. And I realized, no, God just spoke to you, dummy. Ask why. Why? Nothing. But since I was walking away and he told me to stop, I was like, okay, something's happening. And I turn around and there's he, and he's dealing with this one stump that's just so stubborn it's not going in to the wood chipper. And he's got his hand on the bar. And the thing about the bar is when you pull it forward, it sucks things in. When you push away, it spits it out. And he's got his foot on it. He's pulling on the bar to push it in. And then all of a sudden it grabs, and it grabs his boot, and he starts going in. And I've never heard a man scream like that in my life. Keeping in mind, we're about half hour outside the city or from the nearest hospital, so I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, he's not going to make it. And I mean, the blades are right there. It's got his boot, and it's up to his knee. I know he's pulling out a stump, and I run over, and he's in panic, pulling away from the emergency stop. And as I'm sprinting, I just said, okay, Lord, just give me more strength than I can bear, because I need to not only push against him, I need to push against the machine to get this thing spitting out the right way. And with ease, I fling this thing forward, which was a God thing. It wasn't just adrenaline. It was like Samson's strength. It's not bragging. That's just the way it was. And this machine spits him out. And I didn't look at first because I thought I was going to throw up, and that's not going to help the situation if I puke all over my buddy. Hey, you okay? You know, open wound infection and stuff. And I looked down, and again, it was up to his knee, which is an impossibility. He pulls out a full leg with the boot ground down to the sock, and not a drop of blood. A few bruised and crushed bones in the ankle from the pressure, and that's it. And it was a miracle. And this is a guy who's been bugging me about being a Christian for so long. We get in the van as he's taking the rest of the day off, obviously, and we're driving him into town. I look at him and said, you know, my God saved you. He said, I know. But the thing is, God does these impossible, crazy, stupid, ridiculous things when we least expect it. Like when you're wanting to go to the bathroom. He might send you on a completely different trajectory saying, I want you to save a man's life. I want to see a victory that's so deep it goes more beyond the physical, but into the emotional, that it gets their attention, that they know that I'm at work and I care. 2 men, 1 sword against 10,000. So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. Let me lead by example. This is my ministry and calling. I'll go first, exposed and vulnerable. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. Absolute certainty in that moment that God is about to do something impossible. But he doesn't even know what's about to come next, which we're going to get into next week. But it doesn't matter where you come from. God can use you to bring about inspiration and influence to transform people's lives if we're just willing to say, I need to do something. And victory can come for those who cannot, will not, or aren't able to fight for themselves. A lot of times our actions have more to do with others than it does ourselves because of God's impact on the surrounding community. Elijah stood alone in history. 1 man against 400 prophets of Baal who had turned the entire nation of Israel against God. And they started worshiping Baal. And again, these are demonic summoners who actually have powers and giftings. See, far too often we don't give the enemy credit saying, it's this and that. He's got impressive tricks. He does stuff. He's got power. And when people see that, it's tempting to follow because it's tangible and it's real. And God says, okay, go. Let's do the offering, set up the altar, set up the cow. Let them go first and say, whoever calls down fire from heaven first and devours this offering, their God is God, and we'll settle this once and for all. And they're dancing, and they're cutting themselves, and they're doing their incantations, and Elijah all the while is taunting them. 1 man, with 400 other people who could have easily killed him had it not been for God. He gets to the point right before it's his turn, he says, well, maybe Baal's taken a dump. Is the most accurate English translation. He mocks their God so hard to their face because he's so certain that God can and will do something that will change the lives of his people forever that he taunts them because there is no fear of the enemy if you know the one who's got the victory. And then he just says, okay, Lord, show these people, change their hearts, bring them back to you, and the fire comes down, it consumes the offering, it destroys the stone tables, all the water, and there's a crater in the ground like an asteroid just hit there, and the entire nation falls on their face and repents and says, God is God. There was victory, and Elijah was certain of it, just like we need to be too. I've got a friend in my life who's so convinced right now, and he's battling this, that he needs to change certain behaviors in his life before God will do a character transformation. I said, no! He loves you. You want this stuff to change, give it to him. Say, I want this to change, but change it for me. It's not just about having the right actions or canceling out the wrong ones. It's coming as you are and throwing yourself at the feet of the one who has ultimate victory, saying, change who I am so what I do can't help but be changed, and follow suit in what you're doing in my life. And there's certain things we have to acknowledge because there's certain people in this congregation that have done some amazing things that just need to stand out. And I'm kind of ticked off that Melly stole some of my thunder for lifting up Wes and Iris here, for donating money for the flooring. That matters. They believed enough in the fact that our kids are important. And I'm not saying that no one else, this isn't a comparison. I just want to point out people to embarrass them and also lift them up simultaneously. They said, we have the means, we're going to do something. Not because we prayed about it and the Lord spoke to me in a dream and said, you need to do this. Because they felt that it was the right thing to do. Small things, right? It's the same application for small things as big things. We need to meet a need. They also saw and heard last week as we talked about that we need a new vacuum. Well, guess what they did? They brought us a vacuum for the church. Small things, but based upon who you are and the decisions you make and for who you stand for, to be able to do something when there's a need that needs to be met. It makes big differences. Teresa Farstead, who isn't here this morning, just got her master's degree. And that's something we need to celebrate together. So when you see her next, and I'll probably repeat this, you might hear this online. I hope you're listening, Teresa. Well done. When people take steps to better their life, whether it be education or any of these other things, we choose to do something. God will use it and choose to bless us. And her whole study was writing this whole paper on the effective leadership principles. Unbeknownst to her, she gave me a copy. It's impacted me. And it's going to impact a lot of other people because it's step-by-step things of what everyone can be doing to be an influential, proper leader. Simple things. Because they need to be done. Because we choose to do them. Can have such great influence on other people that we can't even fathom. It blows my mind. You know, it's funny when you look at Catholicism, I'm not going to pick on them for too long. They've got these patron saints for different things, right? And they've got one for travel and one for all this other stuff. If I was going to choose a patron saint, it'd be Jonathan. The one who gets off his butt and does something. Patron saint of the one who gets off their butt and does something. It's got a nice ring to it, all like kind of hyphenated. Because sometimes there's a need. You see, Jonathan's character was so rooted in the identity and capabilities of God that he could not ignore the injustice that was going on. He said, well, I'm going to go do something. I'm going to go pick a fight. Not because I think I'm so great, because I know God is so great and the nation has been divided and conquered already. It needs to be liberated. And God can do that, whether by me and you or by himself, or if he wants to do it any way he wants to. But I know that he can, so I need to step up and do something. I choose to do that. Who are we going to be? What are we going to choose? Lord, I thank you so much for this morning. I thank you for this people. I thank you for the honest stories and scriptures we read of people just stepping up and not having the answers, Lord God. I thank you for the whole understanding that faith doesn't mean you're always going to have the answers and you're always going to be right and you're always going to be privy to what God is going to do every step of the way. That faith has nothing to do with knowledge. It has everything to do with trusting in a relationship with you and following suit. That you will lead us to be influential people over others who are invested heart and soul in what you're doing in us and through us, Lord, that we will be a movement of Jesus Christ, and that movement will bring liberation and healing and unity for people who have been so divided and broken for so long. They have no choice but to throw themselves at the feet of God and say, yes, here I am. That we can be a people of influence who just want nothing more than to experience God. Let us be that. So give us the opportunities to choose and give us the courage and the boldness to do just that. To stand up and do something that we may see the influence and character change of all those who you commit to our care. In Jesus' name.